Cryptid, a term for an unidentified creature. But sometimes the unidentified are not creatures at all. They are phenomena, events that mock the boundaries of human perception, of common sense. This is a record of one such something that appeared in our reality, laughing at all we think we know. There are moments in life, moments of inexplicable magnetism. The feeling of knowing a road you've never traveled, the sense of being drawn to a place as if by fate. Neuroscientists might call this déjà vu, a temporary glitch in the brain, a rational, intelligent explanation. But if every mystery in the world could be so neatly filed away, this story would have no reason to be told. The year was 1998, the month, August. While the chill of the IMF crisis had settled over South Korea, the asphalt, paradoxically, was hot enough to melt. The air that summer was uniquely heavy, sticky. It felt as though the entire nation's sighs and despair had condensed into a suffocating humidity. Our protagonist is a man named Yoon. In his early 40s, he navigated this harsh world from behind the wheel of a taxi. His only asset, his only weapon, was his diligence. His cab didn't discriminate. For passengers heading a short distance for a meager fare, or those going to a remote location, he always silently started the meter. Cutting corners was a language he never learned. His pockets were often light, but the rare luck of a long-distance fare was a simple happiness he cherished. The night of the incident was an ordinary Thursday evening. He was heading back after dropping a passenger at a quiet country house in Yangpyeong. His clock read past 10 p.m. The national road, swallowed by darkness, had few streetlights. Only his headlights carved out a narrow slice of the world before him. He'd been driving since dawn. His eyelids were heavy as lead, and the night air, blowing in like a hot draft from a heater, made his mind foggy. Aigo! A soft sigh escaped his lips. He needed to get back to the city, to find at least one more fare to help his family. As he moistened his dry lips, he felt a pressing need in his lower abdomen. An urge he'd been suppressing since he first entered Yangpyeong. He could have just pulled over on the side of the road. In the pitch-black darkness, no one would have seen. He scanned the area for a suitable spot, the endless, dotted line on the road reflected in his headlights, pulling his gaze like a hypnotist's watch. It was then that he saw it, at the edge of his headlight's beam, a narrow opening that looked like a side path. It must be quieter in there, he thought. In his state of extreme fatigue, his judgment was clouded. Without a second thought, he turned the wheel. The moment his taxi left the pavement for the unpaved forest path, the jolt and the cloud of dust felt strangely clarifying to his drowsy mind. I'll just go a little further in, take care of business, and leave. A simple thought, but the car rumbled deeper into the narrow path than he'd intended. The screeching of branches scraping against the car's body was a nervous sound, but his foot remained on the accelerator. It was as if he was being driven, as if the end of this path held a destination he was required to reach. What took control of him then was something more than simple fatigue. Finally, the car came to a stop, as if its engine had died. His headlights illuminated a dark reservoir, its surface veiled in an ominous mist. Rotted reeds shot up from the water's edge like spears. A foul mixture of smells, the stench of stagnant water, damp earth, and something vaguely decaying, assaulted his nostrils. Why did I come all the way out here? Yoon muttered, his senses finally returning to him. A chill ran down his spine. Why had he driven for more than 10 minutes to this disturbing place for something that would have taken 60 seconds on the roadside? A fear of his own inexplicable actions began to creep over him, but the pressing physical need overrode his fear. He got out of the car and walked toward a large tree trunk standing beside the reservoir. In the profound silence, so absolute that even the chirping of night insects seemed to have been erased, The only sound was that of a hot stream of liquid hitting the earth. This is wrong. So wrong. An alarm bell was screaming in his head, a primal instinct to get out, to escape. He quickly composed himself, zipped up his pants, and at the very moment he turned around, he froze. There was a man behind him. The sweltering summer air was unnaturally cool in the space the man occupied, as if a circle had been carved out of the heat. A man who appeared to be in his 70s was staring intently at him. He had made no sound, no rustle of footsteps. His clothes were not just shabby, they were rags. His face was gaunt, skeletal, and his eyes held no emotion, no focus. Hyuk! A gasp caught in Yoon's throat. Sorry, I really had to go. My apologies. He scratched his head awkwardly and apologized, but the old man just stood there, motionless, watching him. The gaze was not that of a living person. Deciding it was best not to engage further, Yoon slowly backed away toward his taxi. When his hand finally gripped the driver's side door handle, he let out a sigh of relief and glanced back. The spot where the old man had been standing was empty. Thinking it was strange, Yoon moved to get into the car, but then he glanced instinctively at the back seat, and his heart seemed to stop. The same old man who had been standing by the reservoir just moments ago was now sitting upright in his back seat. Gah! You scared me! Sir, when did you get in? Yoon's voice was a trembling bleat. The door hadn't opened. The car hadn't shifted. Silently, the old man held out a crumpled piece of memo paper. With a shaking hand, Yoon took it. In the faint light, he saw an address written in a clumsy, almost childish script with misspelled words. Suyuri, Seoul, 000 Street. In that instant, the fear in Yoon's mind was replaced by another emotion: money. In an era of economic crisis, a single day's earnings were the difference between buying formula for his child or not. His brain, fighting for survival, began to rationalize the supernatural event away. I must be seeing things. I'm just tired. Oh yes, Suyuri, right away, Yoon exclaimed, his voice artificially bright as he started the engine. As the taxi left the ominous reservoir and returned to the asphalt road, he felt a small measure of relief. The taxi cut through the darkness, heading for Seoul. As time passed, the silence in the car became more than just awkward. It became a thick, viscous weight pressing down on Yoon's shoulders. He glanced in the rearview mirror several times. The old man remained in the exact same position, his head bowed, perfectly motionless. He looked less like a living person and more like a finely crafted doll. Furthermore, a musty medicinal herb smell had begun to fill the car. It mixed with his air freshener, making his head spin. It's just fatigue, he thought. He wanted to turn on the radio to break the oppressive silence, but strangely, he couldn't bring himself to do it. He had a foreboding feeling that the silence was not meant to be broken. After what felt like an eternity, the lights of Seoul appeared in the distance. The sign for Suyuri came into view, and then the silence that had stretched for hours was finally broken. A voice. Driver. It was a dry, brittle voice, like the crumbling of a dead leaf. Yes, sir. What is it? Yoon stammered, startled. My daughter, see that she gets home safely. The words made no sense. Yoon forced a laugh, brushing it off. Finally, he pulled the taxi to a stop in front of the address on the memo. Here we are, sir. The fare is... Yoon turned off the meter and looked into the back seat. He couldn't finish his sentence. The back seat was empty. The seat cushion was faintly indented where the old man had sat, but the spot was not warm. It radiated a disturbing chill. The doors hadn't opened. The car hadn't rocked. He had simply vanished. Just then, the sound of squealing rusted metal reached him. The old blue gate of a house at the start of the alley was slightly ajar. The fare was no longer the issue. Yoon had to know if he was losing his mind. He had to see this through, to know if this was all a nightmare born of exhaustion or if he had truly experienced something impossible. The fare was just an excuse. He got out of the taxi and walked to the house. Seeing a dim light leaking from under a small side door, he knocked. A young woman in her 20s opened it. As Yoon explained everything, from the reservoir in Yangpyeong to the old man's appearance, the color drained from the woman's face. The man he described was indeed her father, who lived alone in Yangpyeong. She had been worried sick, she said. He had a chronic illness and hadn't answered her calls for days. My father, he had this old callus on the side of his mouth. Did you see? Yoon nodded. He had noticed that distinct callus. And the smell in your taxi? Was it a kind of musty, medicinal herb smell? He realized then that the strange, bitter herb scent had been in his car ever since the old man got in. These specific details began to tear down the daughter's rational skepticism. Her fear of this strange man at her door was overwhelmed by a greater fear that something terrible had happened to her father. Clinging to a desperate sliver of hope, she got into his taxi. The journey back was down that same dark, ominous road. The car was filled with the sound of two people's ragged breaths and the hum of the engine. The daughter's silence was a heavy mix of dread and hope. Yoon's was a maelstrom of confusion at the unreality of it all. Finally, they arrived at the old house near the reservoir. The woman stumbled out of the car and ran inside. Yoon couldn't bring himself to follow, waiting anxiously in the yard. A few minutes passed, feeling like an eternity, and then the sound that came from the house was not a scream. It was a repressed, broken, guttural wail, the sound of a world ending. The truth was devastating. The old man had passed away alone in his room several days prior. The coroner estimated the time of death to be at least 3 days ago. Yoon's story of a dead man taking a taxi to Seoul was dismissed as the ravings of a madman. After everything was over, as Yoon sat alone by the reservoir, the old man's words echoed in his mind. My daughter, see that she gets home safely. It had been a plea, the final desperate testament of a father who died alone. He found the grieving daughter and told her what he had heard. Sobbing, she showed him a letter she had found among her father's belongings. It was a suicide note. The handwriting was clumsy, the spelling incorrect, the same handwriting as the memo from the taxi. My dearest daughter, thank you for taking care of your sick old father. Excerpt. I couldn't bring myself to leave this house. How could I leave the place where our family lived together? Excerpt. I was a poor father, but thank you for being my daughter. The letter ended with a plea for her not to sell the house, the home that held all their family's memories. After the ambulance had taken the old man's body away, Yoon, left alone in the vast darkness, looked toward the spot where he had first seen him and spoke softly. Sir, I brought your daughter home. You can rest now. Tears streamed down his face. With a heavy heart, he walked back to his taxi. As he started the engine, the air inside the car suddenly grew cold. The radio, which had been off, crackled with static. As he turned the car around to leave the mountain path, his eyes caught a reflection in the rearview mirror. The old man was sitting in the back seat. He was no longer in rags, but in a clean white funeral shroud. On his gaunt, skeletal face, which had been so empty and hollow, was a gentle, radiant smile. The old man looked at him and mouthed words. No sound came out, but Yoon could read his lips clearly. Thank you for bringing my daughter home. After his final words, the old man's form dissipated, fading like smoke, like a heat haze on a summer night. Years passed, and Yoon no longer drives a taxi, but he says he has never forgotten the events of that night. Then, in the spring of 2023, he happened to be passing through the area with his family. He searched his memory and found his way back to the Yangpyeong Reservoir. And there, remarkably, the old house still stood. Yoon, now a gray-haired man like the one he'd met so long ago, slowly walked towards the house. Just then, the blue gate opened and a middle-aged woman emerged. It was the daughter from 25 years ago. She didn't recognize him, but he knew instantly who she was. She had kept her father's last wish, protecting the house where their family's memories lived. What was it that sat in the back of his taxi that night? It was, perhaps, a spirit born from a father's powerful will, a lingering consciousness created from his desperate need to protect his home and worry for his daughter, love and attachment. These two emotions are among the most powerful forces of human energy. Sometimes they can create miracles that transcend time, space, and even the boundary of death itself. There are in life moments that science cannot explain, but that the heart understands completely. Tonight's story ends here.